The cafe of a corporate building becomes a stage of tension when a pregnant woman, a suspended lawyer, finds her husband with his mistress. Faced with blatant betrayal, she remains calm until a slap changes the course of the morning. Among shattered cups, papers on the floor and phones recording, a silent judge decides to intervene. This seemingly simple gesture unleashes a wave of justice no one could have predicted. The cafe on the ground floor of the London Business Tower buzzed like every Monday morning. The aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the chatter of hurried executives, secretaries checking schedules on tablets, and interns carrying bulky folders. It was 8:30 in the morning, and the establishment was at the peak of its activity, with all tables occupied and a considerable queue at the counter. Marina Albright pushed the glass door open carefully, balancing a brown leather folder under her right arm, while her left hand instinctively rested on her 7-month belly. Her brown hair was tied in a simple bun, and she wore a discreet navy blue dress, comfortable for her condition. A civil rights lawyer, Marina had been on medical leave for 3 months on doctor's recommendation. The pregnancy had been difficult from the start, with episodes of high blood pressure requiring rest and constant monitoring. She didn't intend to stay long, just to deliver the documents Roderick had forgotten at home that morning when he left in a hurry for an important meeting. Among the papers was a medical certificate he would need to present to the Human Resources Department. Marina knew that building well. She had frequented the place dozens of times when she was still actively working, and she knew Roderick usually had coffee there before going up to his office on the 12th floor. Her eyes scanned the crowded room until she found him sitting at a table in the back, near the window overlooking Oxford Street. Marina smiled automatically, ready to wave, but the smile died on her lips when she realized he wasn't alone. Sitting opposite him, leaning over the table in a posture too intimate to be professional, was Julia Campbell. Marina's heart pounded. Julia, the same Julia who had been her colleague at the law firm 3 years earlier when they fiercely competed for the partner position. Marina had won that dispute through merit and dedication, but the relationship between the two had never recovered. Julia had left the firm shortly after, claiming she had received a better offer. Marina hadn't known until that moment that the said offer was related to the company where Roderick held the position of executive director. But it wasn't just Julia's presence that disturbed her. It was the way she laughed, how she lightly touched Roderick's arm, how he returned a smile Marina hadn't seen directed at her in months. It was the evident complicity between the two, the kind of intimacy not built in corporate meetings. Marina felt her legs tremble, but she took a deep breath as her obstetrician had taught her. Inhale, counting to 4. Hold her breath for 2 seconds. Exhale, counting to 6. The technique helped control her blood pressure and, at that moment, also served to maintain her composure. She wouldn't run. She wouldn't pretend she hadn't seen. It wasn't her style. With firm and deliberate steps, Marina crossed the cafe. Some familiar faces greeted her, but she merely nodded politely without stopping. Her attention was completely focused on the table in the back, where Roderick finally noticed her. His expression changed instantly. The smile vanished, replaced by a mask of surprise and something Marina identified as guilt. Julia saw her too. Her dark eyes gleamed with a mix of defiance and satisfaction that made Marina's stomach churn. But Marina showed no weakness. Years of experience in courtrooms had taught her to maintain serenity even under extreme pressure. "Good morning," Marina said when she reached the table, her voice calm and controlled. "Roderick, you forgot some documents at home. I thought it best to bring them personally." Roderick stood up abruptly, almost knocking over his coffee cup. "Marina, I didn't expect you to come all the way here. You should be resting." "I'm fine," she replied, placing the folder on the table. "Among the papers is the medical certificate you need to hand in to HR today. I didn't want you to have problems because of it." The silence that fell was thick and uncomfortable. Julia remained seated, observing the scene with an indecipherable expression. Marina looked directly at her for the first time. "Julia, what a surprise to find you here. I didn't know you were working at Roderick's company." The provocation was subtle but clear. Julia noticed, and her face hardened. "I started 6 months ago," she replied coldly. "I'm the new compliance manager. Roderick and I have been working quite a lot together on several projects." The emphasis on the word "together" did not go unnoticed. Marina felt a wave of heat rise up her neck, but she kept her expression neutral. "That's good. I'm sure your work is very valuable to the company." Roderick tried to intervene, clearly uncomfortable. "Marina, can we talk about this at home? This isn't the best time or place." Marina ignored him completely. Her eyes remained fixed on Julia, who now stared back with increasing intensity. The atmosphere at the table had become unbearable. Customers at nearby tables began to notice the tension, discreetly turning their heads to observe. It was then that Julia stood up abruptly. Her chair scraped against the wooden floor. "You know what, Marina? You've always been like this. So superior, so controlled, so perfect. But the truth is, you don't even realize when you're losing what's yours." The venomous tone surprised even Roderick, who tried to hold Julia's arm. "Calm down, Julia, there's no need for this." But Julia pulled away. "You want to know the truth, Marina? Roderick has been with me for months, and he's much happier away from your suffocating perfection." Marina felt the floor collapse beneath her feet, but still she showed nothing. Her hand instinctively returned to her belly, protecting the child she carried. She took another deep breath, counting mentally. She wouldn't give Julia the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. "I understand," Marina said simply. "Thank you for your honesty." The calm response seemed to enrage Julia even more. It was as if she expected screams, tears, a scandal. But Marina remained there, serene and dignified, and that was unbearable. That's when it happened. In a quick and impulsive movement, Julia raised her hand and slapped Marina across the face. The sound echoed through the cafe like a gunshot. The coffee cup on the table trembled. Papers from the folder slipped and fell to the floor. The buzz of conversations ceased instantly. Marina staggered with the impact, her hand flying to her face while the other remained firmly on her belly. For a terrible moment she felt her legs give way. But she didn't fall. She took a deep, deep breath as the doctor had taught her. She protected her womb with both hands and remained standing, even with her face burning and her heart pounding. The entire cafe was in absolute shock. Roderick was pale, paralyzed between the two women. Julia also seemed surprised by her own action, her hand still suspended in the air. And Marina, despite everything, maintained her upright posture, staring fixedly at the woman who had just assaulted her. That's when a deep, firm voice cut through the silence. "That was physical. Assault. I witnessed everything." The voice came from a man sitting 2 tables to the left. He stood up slowly and Marina saw him for the first time. He was a gentleman of approximately 65, neatly trimmed grey hair, discreet framed glasses, and an impeccable grey suit. There was something in his posture that commanded immediate respect, a natural authority that made even Julia take half a step back. The cafe manager finally reacted, approaching the table with an astonished expression. "Sirs, please, let's keep calm. We don't want any trouble here." Roderick tried to take control of the situation, his voice adopting the authoritative tone he used in corporate meetings. "There's no need for alarm. It was just a misunderstanding between acquaintances. Everyone can return to their tables and normal routines." But the grey-haired man didn't move. He kept his eyes fixed on Roderick, and there was something in his gaze that made the executive director hesitate. "With all due respect, sir, but that was not a misunderstanding. It was a physical assault against a pregnant woman, witnessed by dozens of onlookers. The lady," he pointed to Marina, "needs immediate medical assistance, and the security camera footage from this establishment must be preserved. Who are you to give orders here?" Roderick tried to sound intimidating, but his voice betrayed nervousness. "This is a private matter." The man walked closer, and Marina noticed he carried a small leather folder under his arm. "My name is Anthony Sterling. I'm a retired judge of the High Court of Greater London and was recently appointed to the city's Council for Civic Integrity. And I can assure you, sir, that physical assault in a public space is not a private matter." The impact of these words was immediate. Roderick turned pale. Julia let out a strangled sound. The cafe manager became even more nervous, and Marina, despite the throbbing pain in her face and the shock still reverberating through her body, felt a wave of relief. She wasn't alone. Anthony turned to the manager. "Please, call an ambulance immediately. The lady is pregnant and may have suffered a spike in blood pressure due to the stress of the assault, and preserve the security camera footage. It will be crucial." "It's not necessary," Marina tried to protest, but her voice came out trembling. "I'm fine, I just need to sit down for a moment." "Madam, with all due respect, it's the paramedics who should assess your condition," Anthony replied with kindness but firmness. "Your well-being and the babies are a priority. Please, sit here." He indicated his own table, where there was still a half-empty coffee cup and a folded newspaper. Marina accepted, her legs finally giving way to exhaustion and shock. Anthony pulled out the chair for her courteously and waited for her to settle before turning his attention back to Roderick and Julia. "You two remain here until the competent authorities arrive." "We don't have to obey your orders," Julia retorted, but there was fear in her voice. "You have no authority over us. I am an eyewitness to an assault. I have every right and duty to ensure that justice is done. If you prefer to leave, you will merely be confirming consciousness of guilt." It was then that Marina noticed another person approaching, a young woman, perhaps 30, with curly hair tied in a ponytail, carrying a crossbody bag and a cell phone in her hand. She had been sitting near the window, and Marina noticed she held her phone in a very specific way, the camera pointed in their direction. "Excuse me," the young woman said, addressing Anthony directly. "My name is Camilla Nelson. I'm an investigative journalist. I recorded the entire incident on my cell phone. I can provide the video as evidence if necessary." Roderick took a step forward, trying to regain some control. "You don't have permission to record people without consent. That's an invasion of privacy." Camilla faced him without intimidation. "We were in a public space. There's no expectation of privacy. And considering I witnessed an assault, I have the right to document for potential legal use. Furthermore, I cover cases of public ethics and corporate conduct. This definitely fits my scope." Roderick's expression shifted from authoritative to genuinely concerned. He looked at Julia, who was visibly trembling now. The reality of the situation was beginning to solidify. It was no longer something he could control or suppress with his usual influence. The cafe manager returned, accompanied by 2 employees. "The ambulance is on its way, and Mr. Sterling, I've already activated the security system to preserve the last hour's recordings." "Excellent," Anthony nodded. "We will await the arrival of the paramedics and police authorities here." Marina observed everything, as if in a strange dream. Half an hour ago she was at home preparing breakfast. Now she was sitting in a crowded cafe, her face still burning from the slap, surrounded by a retired judge, a journalist, and dozens of witnesses, while her husband and his mistress faced the consequences of their actions. She placed her hand on her belly again, feeling the baby stir slightly. Everything was fine. She was fine. She took another deep breath, letting the air fill her lungs completely before exhaling slowly. "Mrs. Albright," Anthony approached and bent slightly to meet her eyes. "I know this is very difficult, but I want you to know that what happened here will not go unpunished. Justice will be done." Marina looked at him, and for the first time since Julia had assaulted her, she felt tears threaten to well up. But she didn't let them fall. "Thank you," was all she managed to say. Camilla also approached but maintained a respectful distance. "Madam, if at any point you want to talk, make a statement. I'm available, but it doesn't have to be now. I understand you're in shock." Marina nodded, grateful for the journalist's sensitivity. Roderick tried to approach her, but Anthony subtly blocked his path. "I think it's best to keep your distance for now, sir, until everything is properly clarified." "She's my wife," Roderick protested, "and she was just assaulted in your presence without you doing absolutely anything to protect her or intervene," Anthony retorted coldly. "So I suggest you rethink your priorities at this moment." The silence that followed was heavy. The cafe customers remained at their tables, all observing the scene with morbid fascination. Some whispered among themselves. Marina saw at least 3 people besides Camilla with cell phones in their hands, probably recording or photographing. The ambulance. Sirens sounded in the distance, approaching rapidly. Julia finally collapsed into a chair, her head in her hands. Roderick remained standing, but all his previous arrogance had evaporated. He seemed smaller somehow, diminished by Anthony's authoritative presence and the weight of the consequences he now faced. Marina closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sounds around her envelop her. The low hum of conversations, the clinking of cups, the coffee machine beeping, the siren growing closer. When she opened them again, she met Anthony's gaze. There was compassion there, but also iron determination. "Justice doesn't choose its moments," he said softly, as if speaking only to her. "It appears when someone decides not to remain silent in the face of injustice." Marina nodded, and at that moment, despite everything, she felt a spark of hope. The paramedics arrived in a matter of minutes, bringing with them a first aid kit and a blood pressure monitor. Marina was assessed right there, while dozens of curious eyes followed every movement. Her blood pressure was elevated, 150 over 95, but not alarmingly dangerous considering the stress of the situation. The paramedic, a middle-aged woman with a maternal expression, held Marina's hand as she talked to her. "Madam, we recommend you go to the hospital for observation. An elevation in blood pressure at this stage of pregnancy needs to be carefully monitored." Marina hesitated. She looked around at Roderick, who was being questioned by newly arrived police officers, at Julia, who was crying silently in her chair, at Anthony, who was talking to one of the officers, showing documents. "I agree with observation, but I prefer my obstetrician. Can I go to his office?" The paramedic consulted her colleague, who nodded, "As long as it's immediately and under supervision." "Can you call someone to accompany you?" "My father," Marina replied, already reaching for her cell phone. "He lives nearby." While Marina made the call, Camilla approached the police officers. "I have a complete recording of the incident. Can I send it to you as evidence?" The older officer, a sergeant in impeccable uniform, nodded. "We will need statements from all involved and witnesses. Can you accompany us to the police station for a formal record?" "No problem," Camilla confirmed. "But first I need to send this recording to my editor. It's of public interest." Roderick immediately protested. "This is defamation." "How you can't spread lies about me?" "They're not lies if it's all recorded, sir," the sergeant replied dryly. "And the press has the right to cover cases of public interest, especially involving corporate figures." Roderick's expression was one of barely disguised panic. He pulled out his cell phone and began making frantic calls, probably to lawyers. Julia remained motionless, as if in a trance. Anthony observed everything with a thoughtful expression, occasionally noting something in a small notebook he had taken from his folder. Marina finished the call. "My father is coming. He should arrive in 15 minutes. The sergeant approached her gently. "Mrs. Albright, I understand you are in a delicate situation, but I will need your formal statement as soon as possible. It can be tomorrow if you prefer to rest today." Marina shook her head. "I prefer to do it today. As soon as I return from the doctor's office and am sure everything is fine with the baby. I understand perfectly. We will be available at the police station." It was then that Camilla received a call. She answered, stepping a few paces away, but Marina could hear fragments of the conversation. "Yes, I have everything. Recorded in high quality. No, she didn't want to give a statement yet. Yes, I will publish with the authorization of the authorities. Understood." When she hung up, Camilla returned to Marina's side. "With your permission, I'd like to publish the story. Obviously, I'll protect your identity if you prefer, but I believe cases like this need to come to light, especially when they involve public figures." Marina thought for a moment. She was a lawyer. She knew the implications of public exposure, but she also knew the power of documented truth. "You can publish. I don't want identity. Protection. I want people to see exactly what happened." Roderick heard and exploded. "Marina, are you crazy? Think about what this will do to our family." "Our family?" Marina looked at him for the first time since the assault. "You destroyed our family the moment you decided to betray the trust of our marriage. Don't blame me for the consequences of your choices." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the police officers stopped writing to observe the confrontation. Roderick opened his mouth to reply, but no words came out. He seemed genuinely lost, as if only at that moment. Did he comprehend the magnitude of what had happened? Julia lifted her head, her face stained with mascara. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, looking at Marina. "I shouldn't have done that. I don't know what came over me." Marina studied her for a long moment. There were so many things she wanted to say, so much accumulated anger and hurt. But she looked at her belly, felt the baby stir again, and chose her words carefully. "You made a choice, Julia. Now you'll have to deal with its consequences, just as I'll have to deal with the consequences of my husband's choices." A man of approximately 60 entered the cafe in a hurry, his eyes immediately searching for Marina. When he saw her sitting with the paramedics, his face filled with simultaneous relief and concern. "Marina!" "Father," she stood up carefully. "I'm fine, the baby is fine, but I need to go to Dr. Henry's office." Albert Albright was an imposing man, a former Crown prosecutor known for his unwavering integrity. When his eyes landed on Roderick, the disappointment was palpable. "We'll talk later," was all he said, but the tone carried the weight of years of courtroom experience. Anthony approached Albert, extending his hand. "Mr. Albright, I am Anthony Sterling. I witnessed the incident and ensured everything was properly documented." Albert shook his hand firmly. "I know your reputation, Judge Sterling. I've always admired your work. Thank you for being here and intervening. I merely fulfilled my duty as a citizen and as a witness. Your daughter showed admirable dignity in terrible circumstances." Marina allowed her father to help her out of the cafe. As she passed Roderick, she stopped briefly. "The documents are in the folder on the table there. Don't forget the medical certificate. And after you're done at the police station, I suggest you find somewhere to stay. I don't want you at home today." Her voice was calm, controlled, but there was a firmness that allowed no contestation. Roderick merely nodded, defeated. Outside, Oxford Street was bustling as always. The sun shone brightly. The sky was cloudless blue and life continued its frantic pace. Marina took a deep breath of the morning air, letting the breeze touch her still slightly reddened face. "We'll take care of you and my grandson," Albert said softly, guiding her to the car parked nearby. "Then we'll see about the, rest." As they drove away, Marina looked in the rearview mirror and saw the cafe still surrounded by police and onlookers. Camilla was outside, talking quickly on the phone while typing on a tablet. Anthony remained at the entrance, talking to the officers, and inside, through the glass, she could see Roderick's silhouette still standing, seeming smaller with each passing second. 3 hours later, Marina was lying on the examination table at Dr. Henry's office, listening to the baby's heartbeat on the monitor. Everything was normal. Her blood pressure had lowered with rest. The doctor recommended home observation and avoiding additional stress, but confirmed that both she and the baby were healthy. That's when her cell phone began to ring incessantly. Messages from friends, colleagues, distant relatives, all asking if she was okay, if what they were seeing on social media was true. Marina picked up the phone with trembling hands and opened the browser. The headline was on all major news portals. "Executive Director assaults pregnant wife of director in Oxford Street Cafe." The video, recorded by Camilla, had gone viral in a matter of hours. Thousands of shares, tens of thousands of comments. The frozen image showed the exact moment of the slap, with Marina instinctively protecting her belly. Marina felt tears finally well up, not from pain or anger, but from a complex mix of relief and exhaustion. Her father held her hand. "You are strong, Marina, stronger than you imagine, and you're not alone in this." She nodded, wiping away her tears. In the weeks that followed the cafe incident, Marina's life transformed completely. She had temporarily moved to her father's house, a spacious apartment in Kensington overlooking the park. Albert had insisted she needed constant care and a peaceful environment for the remainder of her pregnancy. Marina agreed without resistance. The idea of returning to the house she had shared with Roderick was unbearable. Roderick had tried to make contact several times. Messages, calls, even sent flowers. Marina ignored everything. Her lawyer, a college colleague specializing in family law, had taken over all necessary communication. Separation papers were already being prepared, but the case had expanded far beyond a simple marital dissolution. Camilla Nelson, the journalist who had recorded the incident, continued investigating, and what she discovered was much more serious than an impulsive assault in a cafe. Marina was in her temporary bedroom, organizing baby clothes that friends had sent when she heard the doorbell ring, voices in the hallway. Then her father gently knocked on the door. "Marina, the journalist Camilla is here. She says she has important information you need to know." Marina hesitated, but her curiosity won. "Let her in." Camilla entered carrying a bulky folder and a laptop. Her expression was serious. "Thank you for seeing me, Mrs. Albright. I know these days have been difficult. Please call me Marina, and please sit. What have you discovered?" Camilla opened the laptop and positioned it so Marina could see the screen. "In the last 15 days, I've thoroughly investigated the company where your husband works. It's a family corporation, founded by his grandfather 40 years ago. Roderick took over as executive director 3 years ago after his father's passing." Marina nodded. She knew that story. She had been present at the funeral, comforted Roderick during months of mourning. What you might not know is that since Roderick took over, there have been at least 5 internal complaints of moral harassment and abuse of power. All were suppressed by the company's legal department. None reached public knowledge. Marina felt her stomach churn. "What kind of complaints?" Camilla clicked on some files. One employee reported being pressured to accept inappropriate proposals from a manager. When she refused and tried to report it, she was transferred to another branch in another county. Another reported witnessing Roderick shouting at subordinates in a humiliating manner during closed meetings. A third case involves alleged manipulation of financial reports to conceal losses from bad investments. Marina was pale. "How did you get this information?" "Anonymous sources within the company itself. After the video went viral, several people contacted me wanting to tell their stories. They were afraid before, but now they feel they can speak." Camilla opened another file, this one containing a video. "I managed to get access to a recording of an internal meeting that happened 2 months ago. It was secretly recorded by an employee who intended to use it as evidence in a possible labor lawsuit, but gave up for fear of retaliation." She pressed play. The image was shaky, clearly filmed covertly, but the audio was perfect. And there was Roderick, sitting at the head of a long conference table, with his characteristic arrogant expression. "Listen closely," he said in the video. "No matter what happens, no matter who complains, nothing will happen to me. I'm in charge here. This company has been in my family for 40 years. You are all replaceable. I am not." The tone was one of absolute contempt. Marina recognized that voice, that posture. It was the same man who had tried to minimize the assault at the cafe, who had demanded that everyone return to their routines as if nothing had happened. Camilla paused the video. This audio leaked to other media outlets yesterday. The repercussions are enormous. The company's shares have already fallen 15%. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. Marina could barely process the information. She had known Roderick for 8 years. She had married him believing he was a man of integrity, hard-working, fair. How had she not realized who he really was? As if reading her thoughts, Camilla spoke softly. "People like that are very good at maintaining facades. He probably always was different with you, at least at first. That's how they operate." Marina touched her belly instinctively. "And Julia? What happened to her?" "Julia was dismissed immediately after the incident. She's facing criminal charges for assault, but she's also cooperating with investigations into the company's corporate culture. Apparently, she was also a victim of pressures and manipulations, although that doesn't justify what she did to you." Marina stood up, walking to the window. Down below, in the park, children played while parents chatted on benches. Normal, everyday, simple life. Everything she wanted for her son. "What's the next step?" Camilla closed the laptop. "The Crown Prosecution Service is investigating the complaints. A regional ethics committee has been appointed to audit the company, and there are rumors that investors are pressuring the board to completely remove Roderick. And Judge Anthony? Is he involved in this? He gave a formal statement as a witness, and as a member of the Council for Civic Integrity, he is closely following the case. In fact, he mentioned he would like to speak with you, if you are willing. Marina thought for a moment. Yes, I would like to speak with him too. 2 days later, Marina met Anthony in a quiet cafe, away from the bustle of Oxford Street. He arrived punctually, carrying the same leather folder and wearing another impeccable suit, this time navy blue. Mrs. Marina, it's good to see you. Well, how is the pregnancy progressing? Everything is fine, thank you. The baby is healthy. Marina pointed to the cup of tea she had already ordered. Decaffeinated coffee isn't the same, but it's what I can have now. Anthony smiled slightly before becoming serious again. I imagine you've been following the developments in the case. Yes. Camilla, the journalist, keeps me informed. Marina hesitated. I wanted to thank you for what you did that day. If it weren't for your intervention, everything could have been suppressed. Anthony shook his head. I merely did what any conscientious citizen should do. But I confess I was deeply disturbed by what I saw. Not just the assault itself, but your husband's attitude, the immediate attempt to minimize, to control the narrative, to use his position to escape consequences. He paused, stirring his coffee. During my 40 years in the judiciary, I saw many cases like this, people in positions of power who believe they are above the rules that govern the rest of society, and they often get away with it because the system allows it, because witnesses are afraid, because victims are silenced. But not this time, Marina said softly. Not this time, Anthony agreed, because you had the courage not to remain silent, because there were witnesses willing to speak, because technology allowed the truth to be irrefutably documented, but mainly because you, even pregnant, even assaulted, even facing the worst possible betrayal, maintained your dignity. Marina felt tears threaten, but blinked them away. I don't feel courageous. Most of the time I feel scared and lost. Courage is not the absence of fear, Marina. It's doing what needs to be done despite fear, and you have been doing exactly that. They talked for another hour, about justice, about integrity, about how systems fail when good people choose not to act. When Marina finally said goodbye to Anthony, she felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks, a hope that maybe, just maybe, something good could emerge from all that pain. The trial took place 3 months after the incident. Marina was 8.5 months pregnant, her belly prominent under a discreet grey dress. She arrived at the courthouse accompanied by her father and her lawyer, facing a crowd of journalists and photographers outside. Flashes went off, microphones were extended, questions shouted from all sides. Mrs. Marina, how do you feel about the trial? A better life after the case. Will you sue your ex-husband civilly? Marina didn't answer any questions. She merely walked with dignity to the entrance, her father keeping a protective hand on her back. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was solemn. The dark wooden walls, the rigid benches, the coat of arms of justice hanging behind the judge's bench. Marina took her designated seat, breathing deeply to calm her nerves. Julia was already there, sitting between her lawyers. She had lost considerable weight, her face pale and tense. Her hair was simply tied back, no makeup, wearing a formal black suit. When her eyes met Marina's, she quickly averted her gaze, her hands trembling slightly on the table. Roderick was not present at the criminal trial, but Marina knew he was watching from afar. The company had officially dismissed him 2 weeks after the incident. The board of directors, pressured by investors and public opinion, had no choice. Shares had plummeted 40%. Important clients were rescinding contracts. The family brand, built over 40 years, was in ruins. The judge responsible for the case was Judge Helen Robertson, a respected magistrate known for her balanced but firm approach. She entered the room and everyone stood up. The trial had officially begun. The legal proceedings followed their methodical course. The prosecution presented evidence. The video recorded by Camilla was displayed on a large screen. Marina forced herself to watch again, seeing the moment of the assault. Her own instinctive reaction to protect the baby, the contempt on Roderick's face, Anthony's intervention. That's when something unexpected happened. The moment the video showed Julia delivering the slap, Julia herself sitting at the defense table fainted. There was a moment of confusion. Her lawyers held her before she fell from her chair. The judge called the bailiff. Paramedics who were on standby were called. Marina, despite everything that had happened, felt a pang of concern. Julia was taken to an adjacent room, and the trial was suspended for 30 minutes. When they resumed, Julia was even paler but insisted on continuing. The judge observed her carefully. "Miss Campbell, are you sure you are fit to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor." Julia cleared her throat. "In fact, I would like to ask permission to make a statement." The defense lawyers tried to intervene, but Julia interrupted them. "Please, I need to say this." The judge considered for a moment before nodding. "You may proceed." Julia stood up with difficulty. Her hands still trembled, but her voice came out firm. "Your Honor, I would like to read a letter I wrote. It is addressed to Mrs. Marina Albright." Marina felt her heart race. She looked at her lawyer, who made a discreet signal for her to remain calm. The judge nodded again. "You may read." Julia took a folded paper from her pocket. Marina recognized the tight handwriting even from a distance. Julia began to read, her voice breaking at times. "Marina, there are no words that can undo what I did. There are no excuses that justify my action. I have spent the last 3 months trying to understand how I got to that point, how I became someone capable of assaulting a pregnant woman. The truth is, I spent years cultivating resentment, envy, anger. When you got the promotion I wanted, instead of recognizing that you were simply more qualified, I blamed you. I turned you into a target for all my frustrations." She paused, wiping away tears. "And when I started the relationship with Roderick, I convinced myself that I was simply finding happiness. But the truth is, I knew exactly what I was doing. It wasn't love. It was a twisted way to prove something, to take something from you, to finally win." Marina felt tears stream down her face. Albert held her hand tightly. Julia continued. "That day in the cafe when you appeared with such dignity, so much calm, I saw everything I wasn't. And instead of feeling shame, I felt anger. How dared you be so controlled when I wanted to see you fall apart? So I assaulted you, and the moment my hand touched your face, I knew exactly what I had become. A monster." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Even the journalists in the gallery had stopped writing to listen. "I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I hope you know that I will carry this guilt for the rest of my life. And I hope your son grows up surrounded by the love and strength I saw in you that day." Julia's voice finally broke completely. "I'm so sorry. I'm truly sorry." She sat down abruptly, hiding her face in her hands. Her lawyers comforted her, but she shook her head repeatedly. Judge Helen observed the scene with a thoughtful expression before noting something in her pad. The prosecution made its final arguments, highlighting the severity of the assault and the fact that the victim was pregnant. The defense argued that Julia showed genuine remorse and had no prior criminal record. Witnesses were called, including Anthony, who repeated his testimony with the characteristic precision of someone who had spent decades in the judiciary. When it was Marina's turn to speak, she stood up carefully, her belly making every movement deliberate. The judge observed her gently. "Mrs. Albright, would you like to make a statement?" Marina nodded. "Your Honor, I have spent a lot of time thinking about what happened that day. And in the weeks and months that followed, I had to make decisions about how to process all of this." She looked briefly at Julia. "I heard her letter today, I saw her remorse, and I believe it is genuine." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I will not prosecute Miss Campbell criminally beyond what is already being done here. My energy needs to be focused on my son, on creating a healthy environment for him to grow up in, but I hope that justice will be done appropriately. Not for revenge, but because actions have consequences, and these consequences are what keep us civilized." She sat back down, feeling the baby moving vigorously. Albert whispered words of support she could barely process through the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Judge Helen deliberated for 45 minutes before returning with the sentence. Julia Campbell was found guilty of physical assault. The sentence included community service, mandatory psychological counseling, and compensation to the victim. There would be no prison sentence, considering the lack of prior record, the remorse shown, and the victim's choice not to seek maximum punishment. But the judge added something. I will include the letter read today in the official records of this process, not because it diminishes the gravity of the act, but because it represents an important acknowledgement of responsibility. True justice is not just punishment, it is also the possibility of transformation. When the trial ended and everyone began to disperse, Marina remained seated for a moment. Julia passed by her, escorted by her lawyers. For a brief second their hands met. There were no words, just a silent acknowledgement of two women who had been thrown into a storm and now emerged transformed, each carrying their own scars and lessons. 3 weeks after the trial, Marina went into labor on a rainy June night. The rain drummed against the windows of her father's apartment when the contractions began, gentle at first, then progressively more intense. Albert took her to the hospital with the calm of someone who had faced high-pressure situations for decades as a prosecutor. At the hospital, Marina was received by Dr. Henry's team. Everything proceeded normally in the first few hours, regular contractions, dilation progressing as expected. Albert remained by his daughter's side the entire time, holding her hand during the strongest contractions, wiping her sweat, whispering words of encouragement. It was during one of these contractions that Marina received an unexpected message. Her lawyer informed her that the civil hearing against Roderick, scheduled to take place that same night, had resulted in a structured settlement. Roderick had accepted all proposed terms without contestation. The settlement guaranteed complete financial stability for Marina and the baby, including lifelong alimony, comprehensive health insurance, and an educational fund. Marina would not need to personally attend any additional hearings. She read the message between contractions, feeling a wave of relief. Roderick, at least, had taken on this responsibility. Perhaps it was the only decent thing he had done in months, or perhaps it was just another attempt to control narratives, to appear responsible in the eyes of the public. Marina didn't know, and at that moment it didn't matter. What mattered was that her son would have material security. At 3:42 in the morning, with the rain still falling heavily outside, Marina gave birth to a healthy baby boy, 6.5 kilograms, 50 centimeters, with a strong cry that filled the delivery room. When the nurse placed the baby in her arms for the first time, Marina forgot everything. The pain, the betrayal, the assault, the trial. Nothing else existed except that tiny being looking at her with dark, curious eyes. "His name is Gabriel," she whispered, gently touching his tiny face. Gabriel Albert Albright. Albert, who watched from the corner of the room with tears openly streaming down his face, approached. "My grandson," he said with a choked voice. "Welcome to the world, Gabriel." The days in the hospital passed in a blur of feedings, diaper changes, visits, from friends and colleagues. Camilla appeared with a bouquet of flowers and a teddy bear. "Congratulations, Marina. He's beautiful, and thank you for trusting me to tell your story." "You told the truth," Marina replied, "and the truth matters." Anthony also visited, bringing a classic children's book carefully wrapped. "For when he's older," he explained, "it's important that he grows up knowing good stories." Marina accepted the gift with gratitude. "I heard you receive threats because of the case. I'm sorry." Anthony shook his head. "Comes with the territory. When you choose to defend what's right, there will always be those who would prefer you to remain silent. But I regret nothing, and I hope you don't either." "Never," Marina said with conviction. The only person who didn't appear was Roderick. He sent flowers with a card that simply said, "Congratulations on Gabriel's birth. I hope he is healthy." Marina threw the card in the trash without a second thought. The flowers were donated to the hospital's nursery. 2 weeks after being discharged from the hospital, Marina was at home, learning to navigate the exhausting routine of caring for a newborn. Gabriel was a relatively calm baby, but still woke, every 3 hours to feed. Marina discovered that being a mother was the hardest and most rewarding thing she had ever done. Every smile, every burp, every diaper changed was an affirmation of life and hope. It was during one of these sleepless nights, while nursing Gabriel at 4 in the morning, that Marina turned on the television quietly. A local news program was featuring a special report. Albright Engineering declares bankruptcy after misconduct scandal. Marina turned up the volume, watching images of the company headquarters being emptied. The reporter explained that, after months of investigations, audits, and the revelation of years of questionable practices, the company founded by Roderick's grandfather could not survive. Investors had withdrawn funds, contracts were cancelled, employees resigned en masse. The family empire had completely collapsed. Images showed Roderick leaving a small apartment, clearly much inferior to what he was accustomed to. He looked years older, his shoulders slumped, his suit crumpled. When a reporter tried to ask questions, he merely shook his head and quickly got into a modest car. Marina observed everything with complex feelings. She felt no satisfaction in his ruin. There was no pleasure in seeing someone she had once loved reduced in that way. But she also felt no pity. Roderick had made choices that harmed not only her, but dozens of other people. Consequences were inevitable. Gabriel stirred in her arms, finishing his feeding. Marina placed him over her shoulder, making gentle circular movements on his back until she heard a satisfied burp. Her son. Her boy. So small, so innocent, so completely dependent on her. "You are safe," she whispered against his dark hair. "No matter what happens, you will always be safe with me." The following month, Marina received an unexpected invitation. The Council for Civic Integrity, of which Anthony was a part, was organizing a recognition ceremony. Citizens who had demonstrated exceptional civic courage would be honored. Anthony was among the honorees, as was Camilla, and, to her surprise, Marina too. She hesitated to accept. The idea of being in the spotlight again was uncomfortable, but her father encouraged her. "You represent something important, Marina. Dignity in the face of adversity, strength without violence, justice without vengeance. People need to see that." So Marina accepted. On the night of the ceremony, she wore a simple but elegant navy blue dress, tied her hair in a low bun, and held Gabriel, now almost 2 months old, in her arms. Her father accompanied her, proud and protective as always. The hall was packed. Judges, lawyers, journalists, ordinary citizens, all gathered to celebrate integrity in difficult times. When it was Anthony's turn to be honored, he took the stage with his characteristic dignity. His speech was brief, but powerful. "I did nothing heroic that day in the cafe," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. "I merely refused to pretend I didn't see an injustice happening before my eyes. During 40 years in the judiciary, I learned a fundamental truth. The law is only real when it protects those who cannot protect themselves. And at that moment, a pregnant woman needed protection. So I did what any decent person should do. I intervened." He paused, his eyes searching for Marina in the audience. "But the true courage that day wasn't mine. It was Mrs. Marina Albright's, who maintained her dignity even under assault, who chose to trust the legal system even when she had every reason to doubt it, who demonstrated that strength doesn't come from shouting louder or hitting harder, but from standing firm in your principles even when everything around you collapses." The hall erupted in applause. Marina felt tears stream, but she smiled. Gabriel, oblivious to everything, slept peacefully in her arms. When the applause subsided, Anthony concluded, "Justice is not just what happens in courts. It's what we choose to do every day. It's deciding not to remain silent. It's defending what's right even when it's difficult. It's creating the space where healing can happen." Later, when the ceremony ended and people began to disperse, Marina took Gabriel to the fountain in the small park next to the building. The night was cool and starry. The following months brought a routine Marina had never imagined for herself. She had spent years building a brilliant career as a lawyer, always in charge, always fighting, always proving her worth. Now her days revolved around Gabriel. Feedings, naps, diaper changes, baths. Life had become simultaneously simpler and infinitely more complex. But she wasn't alone. Her father was a constant presence, waking up to help during difficult nights, preparing nutritious meals, singing lullabies in an off-key voice that made Marina laugh. Friends visited regularly, bringing homemade food and offering a few hours of rest. The support network Marina had built over the years proved solid and reliable. Julia Campbell served her sentence discreetly in a public library in West London. Marina learned this through Camilla, who continued to follow the developments of the case. As part of her community service, Julia organized books, assisted visitors, and coordinated adult literacy programs. During this period, she began to participate in discussion groups with other women, many of whom were also dealing with regrets and trying to rebuild their lives. One day, Marina received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a letter from Julia, handwritten on simple paper. Marina hesitated before opening it, but finally gave in to curiosity. The letter was long and detailed. Julia spoke about her work at the library, about the women she had met, about the stories of pain and redemption she heard. She spoke about therapy, about finally confronting the demons that had led her to that moment in the cafe, and it ended with an unexpected confession. "I wrote a letter to you months ago, Marina, right after the trial. I wrote everything I felt, all the regret, all the unanswered questions, but I never sent it. I kept it folded inside a notebook as a reminder of what I can never become again. This letter, however, I am sending, not to ask for forgiveness, but so you know that your words in court about actions having consequences and those consequences keeping us civilized changed my life. You showed me that real strength is not violence. It is dignity even in the face of the worst. Thank you for that lesson, even though I know I never deserved to receive it." Marina read the letter twice. Then she folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. She didn't write a reply. There was no need. Some things simply needed to be acknowledged and then left behind. Roderick remained distant, a shadow on the periphery of Marina's life. He religiously adhered to the terms of the financial settlement. The money arrived punctually every week, but there were no attempts at contact beyond what was legally necessary. Marina heard rumors that he was working in a small consulting firm, trying to rebuild something from the ashes of his destroyed empire. She didn't wish him ill, she simply wished him nothing. Gabriel grew quickly, transforming from a wrinkled newborn into a robust and curious baby. His dark eyes explored everything around him with fascination. He smiled easily, especially for his grandfather, who shamelessly spoiled him. Marina discovered that being a mother was the hardest and most rewarding thing she had ever done. When Gabriel turned 1, Marina decided it was time to start rebuilding her own professional life. She wouldn't return to the frantic pace of before. She didn't want that. But there were cases that called to her, especially those involving civil rights and justice for the vulnerable. She began to accept selective consultancies, working from home while Gabriel played on the rug beside her. It was around this time that Anthony contacted her again. He was organizing an educational program on civic integrity for young professionals and would like Marina to speak. She accepted, nervous but determined. The lecture took place on a sunny November morning, exactly 1 year after the cafe incident. The auditorium was full of newly qualified lawyers, law students, and young people interested in social justice. Marina took the stage with Gabriel in her arms because he had a slight fever and she didn't want to leave him with anyone. Initially, she thought about apologizing for bringing the child, but then she saw the faces in the audience, especially the young women looking at her with admiration and understanding. She decided not to apologize. "A year ago," she began, "I was assaulted in a cafe for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or perhaps the right place at the right time, I still haven't decided." She paused, adjusting Gabriel, who snuggled against her shoulder. "What I know is that that moment taught me more about justice than years of studying in law schools." She spoke about dignity, about choosing not to remain silent, about trusting systems even when they repeatedly fail. She spoke about Anthony and how the intervention of a single person can completely change the course of events. She spoke about Julia and redemption, about how punishment without the possibility of transformation is merely disguised revenge. The law, she concluded, is not just words in books or decisions in courts. It's what we choose to do when no one is looking. It's defending someone who cannot defend themselves. It's intervening when it would be easier to look away. It's creating space for healing to happen, even when all we want is revenge. The audience applauded enthusiastically. Gabriel, awake now, looked curiously at all those people. After the lecture, young female lawyers approached Marina, some with tears in their eyes, telling their own stories of challenges and resilience. That night, back at the apartment, Marina bathed Gabriel and put him in the teddy bear pajamas he loved. She sat in the nursing armchair with a children's book, the same stories she had started reading to him since he was a newborn. Gabriel paid attention, his eyes following the colorful illustrations. When the story ended, Marina kissed her son's forehead. "You are safe," she whispered, as she did every night. "And that's all that matters." But this time, as she said those words, Marina realized something. It wasn't just Gabriel who was safe. She was too. Not safe from external threats, for those would always exist, but safe within herself. Safe in the certainty that she had made the right choices. Safe in the knowledge that she had survived the worst betrayal and emerged stronger. Albert entered the room with 2 cups of hot chocolate, a tradition they had developed on cold nights. "You seem lighter today," he commented, handing her a cup. Marina smiled. "Yes, I think I've finally entered that space Judge Anthony mentioned, the space where healing happens." They remained in comfortable silence, sipping chocolate while Gabriel fell asleep in Marina's arms. Through the window, the city of London shone with millions of lights. Life happening in every apartment, every building, every street. Joys and sorrows, victories and defeats, stories intertwining in a complex tapestry of humanity. Marina thought of Julia, working in the library and trying to find redemption. She thought of Roderick, probably alone in his small apartment, facing the consequences of his choices. She thought of Anthony, still, fighting for integrity in a world that often seems to have forgotten it. She thought of Camilla, continuing to expose inconvenient truths through her courageous journalism. And she thought of herself, Marina Albright, lawyer, mother, survivor, not a victim, never again a victim. Just a woman who faced the worst and chose to rise with dignity. Gabriel snored softly, completely relaxed against her. Marina carried him to the crib, placing him with extreme care not to wake him. She adjusted the blanket, checked the room temperature, turned on the monitor, all the rituals that had become second nature. Before leaving, she stopped at the door and looked back. Her son sleeping peacefully, safe, loved, protected, and most importantly, growing up in a world where justice was not just an abstract word, but something real people fought for every day. Marina smiled and turned off the light, leaving only the soft glow of the nightlight to illuminate the room. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new stories, new battles. But today, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. Dear listeners, Marina's journey teaches us that true strength doesn't come from shouting louder, but from standing firm in our principles even when everything around us collapses. If the story of the Oxford Street Cafe touched your heart, we have a special collection of narratives about courage, dignity, and new beginnings. Find our playlist by clicking next to it and discover other stories that celebrate the strength of the human spirit. If Marina and Gabriel have won a special place in your heart, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any story. Every day we bring accounts that explore the complexities of life, justice, and redemption. Tell us in the comments, would you have Marina's same courage? We await you below.